All right, so let's start, right? Okay, so let's talk about nested classes first before we move on. So the goals for today was to understand these concepts, right? So we're gonna let's understand nested classes first. So nested classes, right? I opened this Java tutorial on nested classes, and the main thing you gotta know is this right here, right? A nested class is a member of its enclosing class. Non-static nested classes, basically inner classes, have access to other members of the enclosing class, even if they are declared private. Static nested classes do not have access to other members of the enclosing class. As a member of the outer class, a nested class can be declared private, public, protected, or packaged private. So that's what basically nested class. But everyone's questioning, why do we use nested classes, right? You know, it is a way of logically grouping classes that are only used in one place, right? So if you have like two, three classes that kind of work together, right? But they're like in different classes, might as well just put all those three classes in one class, right? And then call it. It would make your code look clean. It'll be readable and maintainable, right? It also increases encapsulation. What was encapsulation again? Data hiding, right? So yeah, that's what the primary purpose of nested classes are. So let's go over a quick example of a nested class. So I'm just going to create a class called A, right? Okay, so inside this class A, right, let me just have a variable called um, A variable, right? And I'll have a constructor, and I'll have a method as well. This belongs to class A, right? Okay, so we just made a simple class called A. We declared a variable, right? We could initialize it if we want to. We created a constructor, we created a method, right? So if I go to my main class, I create an object of A, right? I'm just gonna call it. So here, if I say A dot, you see that I have access to class A variable and the class, the method called method A, right? Okay, so now let's create another class inside this, right? So we're gonna create an inner class. So we're gonna call this inner class B. Okay. So in here I'm going to create a string B variable, right? A B constructor. And also a method called method B. This belongs to class B. Alright, so does it make sense what I did where what I did just right now? Does it make sense? I basically created an inner class. I basically created a class inside of a class, right? So I created a class B. So brackets are very important, and it's very important why you line them up, right? So you can see this is one block of code right here. This closing bracket aligns with line 14 of class B. Okay, so now let's say I want to create an object. Let's go back to our main class. Do you guys think I'm allowed to create an instance of class B from my main class? Yes or no? So if I have class B, an inner class of inside class A, am I allowed to create a class B object from main method? So the answer should be no, right? It's going to give me an error. it's gonna say you're gonna need to create a class B, right? So you can't uh, do it, right? But we could create an object of class B inside class A. So we could declare an object of class B on the top. So we could just say B, and we could just say something like beeswax, right? Equals new B. So I basically created a class B object called beeswax, right? And that was outside of this class right here. So if I were to say beeswax here, right, and dot, um, let's say beeswax dot b variable, it won't allow me, right? So how would I do it from main method? And main method, I could do this simply like this. So I could just use that a object I created, and I could just say a dot, and here you see I could access the beeswax object. So I could say beeswax object. Then I could press another dot, and I have access to that class B variable, which is B variable, and method B right here. So I could just run it, and it will say this belongs to class B. So I basically created an A object, which is right here, and from that A object, I called on the B object, which was instantiated right here, and then I called in a method B. But this may seem confusing. That's why you need to, it's better if you make your inner classes private. So we're going to make our class B private, and we don't want to have access to this class from main method. So we only want to have access to class B from our class A. So I'm going to declare these as private as well. So if I'm doing this private, I would have to remove public, and I could make this private as well. So now, do you guys think I would be able to access this method? It's giving me an error, right? So if I say beeswax dot, you see no methods from or variables from class B. It's because we made it private. And here we could use that class B, right? That inner class of class B, and we could use it inside this class A to whatever our needs, however we want to program our code. So that's what basically nested classes is. You're basically creating classes inside a class, and the class that you created would basically, be related to the class that is nested inside. Instead of having class A, class B, class C, and they all like serve each other, they all like, let's say they all serve class A, right? Instead of having three classes called class A, class B, class C, in class A, I would just create I would just create two inner classes called B and C, and then I would make them private, and I would only use those class and methods for class A. So it may seem confusing, but so how we call it in main method when we made class B private. So the reason we can call it main method is because in here this is outside of class B, right? But we created a B object called beeswax, and from main class we're allowed to go to that B object. So we could just say a dot beeswax, right? So that's basically saying, hey, I'm calling on class A, and from class A, I'm calling on the B object. And if I press dot, I could access these methods, but we can't see the B variable and the B methods since we made them private. So that's why you would want to make this private as well. So in that way, main class won't have access to this, right? So now if I say a dot, you won't see the B object there. And we specifically want to use this object for methods like probably inside this class. Okay. So now let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about. Okay, so yeah, let's. So our next topic was so we understood nested classes, right? And now let's learn how to use some Java classes. So specifically, I want to look over scanner, the math class, and also the random class. And there's more classes that up to you how much time you want to put in, right? Okay, so what you call it, Ibrahim, summer last week covered over scanner class. So I'm not gonna spend dash time in scanner class, but I'm gonna show you how a scanner works, right? So here inside my main method, um, let's the scanner class. Let's look at the scanner class API, right? So this is how you guys will learn stuff. So scanner Java API, and then I'm gonna click here, and then it will tell me the description of this class, right? So a simple text scanner which can parse primitive types and strings using regular expressions. A scanner breaks its input into tokens using delimiter pattern, which may default matches whitespace. So this might seem new to you guys, but the best thing to do is like just read what it primarily does, and then look at its constructors and methods, right? So these are constructors here. You see that it has they all have the same name, but they each take in different arguments. And now here you can take a look at the methods of this class, and it shows you the description, right? So if I were to say scanner, whatever, let's say I create a scanner object and I say object.close, it'll close the scanner, right? There's these other methods that we're gonna use called like next int, right? So right here, next int, it scans the next token of the input as an int, right? So we're gonna use some of these methods of this class right now. Okay, so now let's there's ways to import it, right? You could manually import scanner class, or you could just create an instance of it first. But first, let's look at the constructor again real quick. Mm, okay, so now we're gonna create a scanner object. So I'm gonna say scanner, and I'm gonna name it sc equals a new scanner, and you can't you can't leave this blank, so I'm gonna have to say, because if you look back here, you see that there's no default constructors for scanner, right? You have to put a source inside there. So the source I'm gonna put is system.in, right? That's the main common one. So basically the user input, whatever user inputs, that's gonna be the source. So now we get an error, right? If you hover over scanner, it's gonna tell you quick fixes, right? So one of the quick fixes is to import the scanner from java.utility. And we're going to click on that. And you're going to see that it's automatically going to import this scanner class right here. You could have manually typed that in if you want to, if you knew where it existed. That's how you would import it. Okay, so now we made our scanner object, right? So how do we use this scanner? So first of all, it's basically scanner is like basically getting it says it right here, right? Let's go all the way top again. Give me a sec. A simple text scanner which can parse primitive types and integer using primitive types and strings using regular expressions. Okay, so let's say I system that out. I create a system that out, right? Now I just say hello, what is your name, right? So what I want the user, right, to type in his name after this message, right? So I want, and whatever he puts in as that um, message inside, and after that, whatever he types in, that's going to be his name. So first of all, we're going to need to create a variable that will hold the name. So we're gonna create a string called username, right? Okay, so now I created a string called username. So now how do I use scanner here, right? So I want scanner to use this method. If you go back to our API, I wanted to use um, next line. So this is a string type, and it advances the scanner past the current line and returns the input that was skipped, right? So whatever that user puts in, that's going to be stored in. So how do we store in that information? So we're going to take in this username, this string object called, the string variable username. I'm going to say username equals, and then we're going to use the scanner object, right? And we're going to say sc dot, and now we need to use the method, right? So since we're asking for a name, we want to read a string, right? So we're going to use next line. If we were to ask them what is your age, we're going to use next int, right? Which is where is it? It's right somewhere right here. Let me just check. Next int, right? So it's right here. So you can see it scans the next token of the input as an integer. But we're focused on the string because we're asking for their name. So we're going to use sc dot next line, right? And we're going to enter it. So now this variable username is going to hold in the whatever that user has as an input, right? So now we could simply just system out, and we could say hello, and we could concatenate it with the username. So whatever they put, it's going to say hello, and let's run it right now. So it's asking me, well, hello, what is your name? Where's that coming from? It's coming from this line, right? Before this line, I created a scanner object and I created a username variable. The username variable is to hold whatever that scanner is going to read, and then I'm going to print out hello username, right? So let me just say Fahim. Now it says hello Fahim, right? So this is how you basically use a scanner class. Basic uh, system out, system in stuff. So does that is uh are you guys able to do this? This basic scanner example. If you understand how to do this, then you could use scanner as many like you would understand how to use the scanner. Let's ask it for the age, right? So now I'm gonna say sys out. I'm gonna say hello. Okay, so how old are you, right? And what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do here? Am I gonna use the username variable? Does that make sense to you guys? If to use that username variable? No, right? I would need to create another variable that holds an integer type, right? Since we're asking for the age, we're gonna create an int, and I'm gonna say user age, right? So I created that variable right here, and now I could just say user age equals, and what do? I call in the scanner object, which we created was sc. Say, and what method do I use here? Do I use next line? Since I'm dealing with integers, right? I want to use next int. So the next integer, so it's basically what next int does. It basically sees that input you've made and sees whatever integer you put in there. That's going to be read. So I'm going to use next int, and now I'm going to print out hello, and I'm going to say username. You are followed by user age, years old. Okay, so let's run this program. Hello, what is your name? So let me put Josephine. Hello, Josephine. So how old are you? I'm just gonna say 30. Hello, Josephine. You are 30 years old, right? So you see the message it printed out right here. So do you guys understand how the scanner class works now? So it depends what line you're reading, right? So if I want the user to put in a string answer, right? So I'm gonna say next line. If I want them to print use a integer, I'll use next int, right? So there's next byte, there's next float, right? It's really good to look at the API and look at the methods. So that's how you learn. That's what when we get into Selenium, Selenium has its own API. So what we're doing with Scanner right now, we're looking at the methods. That's what we're gonna need to do with the Selenium API. We're gonna need to learn like not just Selenium but JUnit, TestNG. We need to look at all those methods. If we get familiar with those stuff, we can be proficient in coding with Selenium. We'd understand all these methods stuff. Okay, so that was an example of scanner class. Okay, so now what's next? Now let's look at the math class. Okay, so remember that um, question from last weekend's class. Was Java that language? Is it automatically imported? Yes or no? Do we need to import Java.language? And what was the answer? So the answer was no, right? We don't need to automatically import Java.language. Why? Because if we didn't, then we'd have to import it, and it would cause a mess. And basically, Java.language has all the basic features like string, integers, all those stuff. So let's take a look in that package, right? So if I were to go to java.language, right? So these are all the packages of Java right here. So let me just go to java.language. So it's right here. I found it, right? And you see all these classes here. So there's like Boolean, bytes, characters, class loader, all these kind of classes, right? String, strict math, blah blah blah, right? So do I so if I want to use the math class, would I need to import math? Yes or no? Would I need to import uh, java.lang.math? No, right? I don't need to import it. It's automatically imported. So now let's look at now. Okay, so let me just comment these. Actually, I'm gonna create another main. And I'm gonna call this. Okay, so I created another main method, right? I don't want it. I don't want to have everything inside here. It's gonna be confusing. So, okay. So now inside this main method, let's deal with the math class, right? So, would I would I need to import the math class here? Yes or no? I just answered it like a minute ago. So the answer is no, right? Because it's part of the Java.language class and it's automatically imported. So does that mean do I have to create a math object in order to use the math functions? Yes or no? What do you guys think? Do I need to use do I need to create an object of math to use the math stuff? The answer is no, right? But we'll see why. So some classes are defined in their own way. Um, but basically all the Java.language stuff, I think they're all static. So you don't need to create an object of it. So this is the math class right here. So you see it gives a description, right? Okay, so it's a final class, right? We can't change anything here. And look at this right here. What is this right here? What kind of method is this? If this is my math class, right? And I see private math, this, right? This is a default constructor from math class. But they made it private, right? It's because they don't want to let anyone instantiate this class, right? They don't want anyone to create an object of this class. Why? Because all these stuff right here, all the methods here are static. They're all static. So we don't need to create an object of this class. We can just how are you able to use static methods? What do you do? What do you do to use static methods? How are you able to access static methods? So that's a good interview question, right? And Mr. Mafibai answered this last week. It was part of the weekend questions as well. So how do you access static methods from a different class? So, yeah, so good stuff. So Kahina said you would use that class's name and then use that method, right? So our class name was called math, and you saw that every methods inside math were static. So we just simply have to say math dot, right? You see we have all these methods right here. They're all static methods, right? We have absolute value, right? We have sine, tangent, cosine, all those stuff from like high school algebra, college algebra, and all those stuff, right? We have max, we have min, right? We have multiply, we have um, round, right? We have floor, ceiling, right? Up to int exact. So it has all of these methods from math class. So I'm going to show you guys some methods that are important that you're going to use somewhere throughout your programming career. So let's just talk about some methods right here. Okay, so let's talk about the absolute method, right? So if I were to say absolute of, okay, so this is a double, right? So if I were to say 54.3, right? And let me just system that out. So what would this print out? Are you guys familiar with the absolute value? It's basically how far away is it from, how many units is it away from zero, right? So it would print out 54.3, right? If you have like a negative number, if you have negative 25, the absolute value is 25. If you have like positive 30, the absolute value is 30. So that's what absolute value is, right? So let's check another method. You can say math dot, and let's use power, right? Pow. And what pow is basically taking a number uh, and powering it to the exponent. I forgot the keywords when you use. It was like base and something. I forgot. So let's say we want to say 2 to the power of 5, right? So that's basically 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. You guys agree, right? So how do you fill in the power, pow, right? So you would say 2, and then for B, you would say 5. And if I were to run this, it's going to give me 32.0, right? Since I used, this takes in double, but I put in 2 and a 5. So you see it takes in 32.0. So it's basically 2 to the power of 5. Once again, it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Let's use another method. This method, I'm going to say floor, right? So if I have a floor and I say 11.4, right? So what does a floor mean basically in math terms? So floor is basically like So if I were to tell you guys there's a floor and then there's a ceiling, right? So floor is basically something at the bottom and ceiling is basically on the top. So the floor of 11.4, it's gonna print out 11, right? And let's say, what about the floor of 11.7? What would it print out? It'll print out 11, right? Simply because it's for the floor, right? We're finding on the floor of 11.7. And there's another one, right? That's called the ceiling. Seal, right? Did I spell it right? S-I, no, S-E-I-L, right? And I put like 15.10, right? So what would the answer to this be? The ceiling of 15.10. Ceiling is the top, right? It's basically floor is basically where where you stand, right? Like at the bottom, and then the ceiling, right? Your house ceiling is all the way on top. So that's basically saying if 15 was uh basically a present in your house, what's the ceiling of 15, right? So what's gonna be in the next, like what's gonna be top of it is gonna be 16. So it's gonna print out 16. All right, so the ceiling of 15.10 is 16. And what about 15.9? 90 is going to be 16 as well. So floor, it returns the answer of what integer is the floor of it, right? And then ceiling is the integer that's above it. So now let's do some other methods. And let's say math dot round. Okay, so if I'm saying round, right, and I say 5.68, this is basically rounding it, right? So if I say 5.68, what will it print out? It's going to print out 6, right? If you want to round it to the nearest ones place, we would have to use like something like this. I forgot how to do it exactly, right? So what if I say 5.28, and if I round it, what would it print out? It's gonna print out 5, right? So yeah, this is basic math, right? But all these methods are already defined in a math class from Java.language, right? So if you're programming and you want to let's say you're programming something on stock on on like your business, and you want to know like the standard distribution or like the curve or like projected salary or something, you would typically use methods from this math class. So it's good to know methods from the math class. Once again, you can simply go to math Java API, right? And it shows all these methods right here. So you have the absolute value, you have the arc cosine, right? The arc sine, all these stuff. To radians, to degrees, returns this trigonomic tangent of an angle, right? So it has all these methods right here. Yep, it doesn't matter what IDE we use, right? So this all belongs to Java. So it doesn't matter what IDE we use, we'll have access to these stuff. Okay, so that was an example of using the math class, right? Now let's talk about another class called random. Actually, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna do it in the same class. Okay, so when you guys think of random, what do you guys think of? When you hear the word random, what does it mean? I can't think of any other synonyms base for random, right? It's hard to, yeah, it's basically, it could be anything, right? There's no clear outcome. So why? why is there a random class in Java, right? There's so many programs out there that have random uh, that use random values and stuff to like for their program. It depends what they're doing, right? So let's just talk about the random class. So the random class is not part of the language Java.lang, right? Are we so are we supposed to create an instance of random class to use random methods or no? What do you guys think? So are we supposed to create a random object to use the random features? So the answer is yes, right? So let's create a random object. So we're going to say random or rand equals new random, right? Okay, so now it's telling me I get an error. I need to import random. You see it's coming from java.util. And it's imported, right? You could manually type this. It's all up to you. I simply just if since I know the class, I just type it in and then I just import it. And if you want to look at the random methods, you could just type in random Java API. And here are all the uh, methods, right? There's not many right here. So you see it takes in two constructors. One constructor is creates a new random generator, and the other one creates a new random generator using a single long seed. So, what kind of random constructor do we use right here? So once again, this is week one stuff, right? I used the blank default, right? This is my default constructor. So I basically created a new random generator. And now I have access to all these methods from that class. Here, this next, right? It generates the next pseudo random number. Um, next int returns the next pseudo random uniformly distributed int value from this random generator sequence. Next int returns a pseudo random uniformly distributed int value between 0, which is inclusive, and the specified value. So let's use this one right here. So I'm going to say rand dot, and I'm going to say next int and the bound, right? The boundary. So it's going to be from 0 to what? So let's say I have, let's say in people in tech, right? Our total number of students in our class is 65, right? So I'm gonna, let's just say 65 right now, right? So this, if I were to run this right here, this would give me a random number from 0 to 65 randomly. All right, so let's try this out. I'm gonna print this out to the system.out. Save and run. So it gave me the number 27, right? Let me run it again. It gave me 37 now. Let me run it again. It gave me 47. It gave me 26. It gave me 39, 53, 41, 34, 57. You guys get the point now, right? So this method next int, it basically takes in from 0 to whatever you put and it will generate a random number. So let's create a method called dice roll, right? So I'm going to create a method outside of main. And since I'm going to make this a static, right? And I could have yeah, I'm going to return it. I'm going to return the type and I'm going to say roll dice. Okay, since I'm rolling a dice, right? I don't really need anything inside the parameters. So let's create the face, right? Int results. And now I'm gonna say I want, okay, so I want to use the random function here, right? So I'm going to need to create a random object inside this method. So I could simply just just copy and paste this here, and now I created a random object right here inside this method. So I won't be able to use the random features if I don't have the object, right? If I made this static, then I don't think I need to do this. Why am I getting an error? Let me just. Okay, since this is not a class, it's the main method, so it's not gonna work. So let me just call it right here inside the method. So inside this method, I created a random object, right? Not static. And now I'm able to use this object inside this method, right? So now I want to say result equals rand, and I would say next int, right? And since it's a dice, right? It has 6 sides, so number 1 through 6, right? So what's gonna be the boundary? What should the boundary be? If it's a six sided dice, dice is plural and die is one dice. Okay, so if it's a 6 sided die, um, how many faces is it gonna have? Obviously 6, right? So I'm gonna put 6 right here, and then I'm going to return result. And let me just put a system.out here saying what that result is, right? So I'm gonna say you rolled a, and I'm gonna say result. So does this method make sense for you guys? Do you guys understand the logic of this method right here called roll die? It's basically gonna roll a dice, right? A die, and it's gonna tell me what I rolled. So do you guys understand this? Yes or no? I basically create a random object in order to use that random feature, right? If I didn't create this here, how am I able to like generate it from 1 through 6 randomly, right? So I need to create a random object inside this method. And then I created a result variable that will hold what that result is, and I assigned that result to random dot next integer, and it's from 0 to 6. So now the question is that um, if it's inclusively from 0 to 6, it's gonna give me a 0 when I roll a dice. So let's try it out right here. So I'm gonna call this. I'm gonna say roll die, and I'm gonna run this method right here. So see, I didn't have to create an object because this is a static method, right? And since it's in the same class, I don't have to say the class name. I could just simply say the method name. So I'm gonna say roll die. It's gonna say you rolled a 1, right? Let's roll it again. Now it says you rolled a 0. Is there a 0 in a die? Is there a 0 uh, face in a die? So the answer is no, right? It's only 1 through 6. So we're gonna have to modify our code. So we're gonna have to say 6 plus 1 here, right? So if it did say 0, it's gonna say you rolled a 1. So let's try it right here. You rolled a 2, you rolled a 5, you rolled a 1. See? So far we created a method that rolls the dice, right? And it basically tells us what that result is. So that's a good example of using the random generator, right? Or you could create a method called lottery, right? And you could say the winning numbers are blah blah blah, right? From 0 to whatever, like, or the ping pong thing, right? The New Jersey or something, pick 5 or something, right? You have each ball labeled 1 through 50, and for each ball you randomly select a ball, right? See, you could use that random features from this class, and you could create many programs as you want. Okay, so we looked over so we went over some classes. So we went over the scatter class. Oh my god. Hold on, give me a sec. Okay, they stopped. So we have the scatter class, the math class, and the random class. So there's obviously more classes in Java, right? But we can't spend that much time in classes, or else it's gonna take like 5 years, right? So it depends what your profession is, what your company is involved with, or like what your projects is involved with. You're gonna be dealing with those kind of classes. Yeah, yeah, that's you just simply research APIs to learn more about that class. That's why Mr. Mafibai suggested you guys. It was part of the homework, I think, or he just told you guys to you know, look at 5 different APIs and look at the methods, right? And then use those APIs inside your classes. Just create a random project using those APIs. If you guys learn how to use those if you guys learn how to read APIs, then you guys can easily become a developer. You just need to understand how to use those methods and functions. So it's random only for return type. No, random is basically right here. Let me go back to that class. So what's the purpose of random? So you see all the methods right here. Um, you could use these methods, and you know, it'll return a random number. You don't need to necessarily use a return type for random. It's all up to you how you program your code. So I could like create a program called like public static void something, and I could use the random features in there, but I don't really need to return anything. So it depends how you use your program, how you write your program, and what you're dealing with. All right, so now let's talk about control flow statements. So these are very important to understand and learn. So before I go to control flow statements, I want to test you guys on your guys' logical operators, right? So what are logical operators? Um, do you guys do you guys know what a truth table is? Are you guys familiar with the truth table? Okay, so the truth table is usually I think is described in like discrete math courses or something, or and like computer science courses, because it's very it's very important to understand the truth table, right? Especially dealing with logical operators. So let's say I have a true statement right here. Let me make a box. Hold on. Insert table, right? So okay. So let's say I have a true statement right here. I have a false statement right here. And I have a true statement right here and a false statement right here as well. Right? And let's call this the and and table, right? So this is the and table, and so if I have a true value and a true value, what should it print what should the result be? Like it should be true, right? If I have a true and a false value, what should when I say true and false, it should give me false, right? If I have a false and true value, it should give me what? It should give me false, right? And if I have a false and false value, it should give me false. Let me just be sure, because the last time I've done this was a while ago. So truth table and yeah, so true and true would give you true. True and false will give you false. False and true will give you false, and false and false will give you false. So that's for the and table, right? Now let's do one for. Let me just write and table right here. And now let's do the OR table. True, false. So these are basically logic 101, right? So in an OR table, if you have a true value or a true value, so what should it print out? It should print out, I mean, what should the result be? It should be true, right? If you have a true or a false value, what should it be? It should be true, right? If you have a false and a true value, what should it be? True, right? And if you have a false and a false, false. So let me be sure again. Uh, false, no, no, or table. So true or true will give me true, true or false will give me true, false or true will give me true, and false will give me false, right? So you guys would see this in like computer science or like philosophy or like electrical engineering, right? They use these kind of tables. They use these truth tables right here. So I'm gonna try and think of an example. Um, so if I were to say it's either I find business math. Yeah, they also show this in math as well. So if I were to say like okay, no, I'm not gonna give an example. I'm just gonna make it more confusing. But you guys should memorize this truth table right here. Um, for the first time, I can tell you guys don't need to understand why is true and why is false. You could simply just memorize. So this is the stuff that you would want to memorize. The truth tables for and or nor. It's pretty simple, right? For and, you would need both things to be true in order to give you true, right? So here you see true and true, it gives you true. But if you have true and false or false and true, it gives you false. And if you have false and false, it's obviously false. For and, you would obviously need both of the statements to be true. And for or, you just need either statement to be true in order to give you true, right? So you have true and true, they're both true, so you get true. You have true and false, one of them is true already, right? So you get true. You get false and true, one of them is true already, so you get true. And then you have false and false, it gives you false. So that's a good way to remember it, right? So why did I explain this? Is because we're going to be using these logical operators when we're dealing with our conditional flow statements. So let's talk about if and else right now. So I didn't make a slide. I didn't have um, time to like do it, but there was already a good website that describes all these stuff, right? So you could just um, I'll have the link down here. Inside this link would is basically has it all for all these stuff right here. Okay, so let's talk about the if then and if then else statements, right? So the if then statement is the most basic of all control flow statements. It tells your program to execute a certain section of code only if the particular test evaluates to true. For example, the bicycle class allowed could allow the brakes to decrease the bicycle speeds only if the bicycle is already in motion. So here's an example of using the if statement, right? So if and is moving, right? So is moving is probably a boolean variable, so it's either true and false, right? So if is moving equals true, then it would say if moving is false, then it would say the current speed minus because you're obviously not moving, right? So let's try. let's not use this example here. Let's look at our own example and try to make it more clear. So I'm going to create a new class. I'm creating a new package at least. And here I'm going to create a main class. Okay. So you usually use this conditional statements inside methods, right? I'm uh, so I'm going to use this here in my inside the main method. So let's say I have a variable that says int uh, x equals 12, right? Now let's create, now once again, let's use the if statement, right? So if I say if x is greater than 5, right? I want to print out it's greater than 5, right? Or I could just say hello. Okay, so here I have an if statement, right? So here, this is where it takes the logical thing, right? So if x is greater than 5, right? You can't have something like x. You can't say x is assigned to like 3, or you can't declare a variable in here, right? You can't do that. You can only use I forgot how to say it in a clear way, but you have to use it has to be logical operate like it has to be logical stuff inside this parentheses. So if we say so x is greater than 5, that's a logical thing, right? So if this was true, right, it would print out this. So what would, if I were to run this, right? What would it print out? What's it going to print out if I run this? It's gonna print out hello, right? Okay, so why does it print out hello? Because here I declared an integer x variable that has the value 12, and here in my if statement, right, I said if x is greater than 5, then print out this. So it basically says if 12 is greater than 5, 12 is indeed greater than 5. So now you're gonna print out this. So let's print out another thing right here and say ended, right? So if I were to print this again, what would it print out now? What would it print out? It's gonna print out both, right? So it's gonna say hello and ended. So you see here, it printed out hello ended, right? So I seen that some of you guys said that you guys need an else statement. You guys don't need an else statement. It depends how you're programming. It depends what kind of logic you're trying to implement, right? So if x is greater than 5, you could remember the main method. It reads line by line, right? So here, this value was true. Okay, so it's true. Then it's not gonna do anything. It's just gonna print this out, and then it's done. That's it. And then it's gonna move on to the next line, and it's gonna print out this. What if I say x is equals to 3? What will it print out now? Is it gonna print out ended? It should print out just ended, right? Why? It printed out ended. Why? Because let's remember it reads it line by line. So here we use a conditional if, right? If x is greater than 5, then you want to print out hello. But the thing is, x is a 3, right? So it's this is false, right? So it's gonna ignore this, and then it's gonna move on to the next line. And the next line we just said print out to the main method, uh, print out ended. That's it. So do you guys understand? I gave this example so you guys can understand like how a program reads, right? So you guys don't really need an else statement. You don't think of whenever you use an if, you need an else. That's not true. You can simply have a program run like this. It depends on how you're writing your program and how you want the control flow to be. So this is a basic if statement. So what if I say, um, let's 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 create a string, right? I could say string name equals Fahim. Now let's combine some of the stuff that we learned from previous stuff, right? So I want this to print out that if I want this to print out that if my name uh, contains FA. So if my name contains FA, it's gonna print out contains FA. So it's gonna contain the F contains letter contains FA, right? So fa if it so I have a string name called Fahim, right? So what should I put right here? We're gonna use stuff that we learned from last week and we're gonna combine it, right? So if what? What are we gonna put in? So I wanted to print out it's gonna print out contains fa if you know Fahim contains whatever, right? So remember how we were learning about string methods? So we're dealing with a string variable here, right? So we're gonna say name, and then we're gonna use a string method, one of those string methods. We're gonna say contains. So in this string method, it checks if there's a sequence of characters, right? So if I'm gonna say fa, right? So if name contains fa, right, it's gonna print out this. So what do you guys think will print out now? Let's see if that's the case, right? It prints out ended. Why? We need to use another string method. And what's that string method? So here you see my name is Fahim with a capital F, right? But here it says if the name contains FA, which is lowercase, then it'll print out this. That's why I didn't print out contains Fa, because my name contains a capital F. So what should I do? What should I do before this if statement to make this print out, make this thing work out? So what is that? What is that method in string class that basically turns everything to lowercase, right? We have to use that. So you're going to say name to lower. So that basically turns every letters and every letter inside the string to lowercase. Now if I were to run this, what would it print out? It should print out contains file, right? So you see here that it's not printing it out, right? So let's read it from the top line to bottom, right? So here we say string name equals Fahim. So name to lowercase. So now this is a good way of seeing what's wrong with your code. So let's see what this prints out right here. And I want to see if oh, and I want to see if it passed that code. I'm gonna say passed that code. So this is how you could like debug your code and see like what line isn't working. You would implement system.outs like somewhere part of your code and see what prints out. So if it prints out this, that means my program, you know, what it did this as well. So system.out. So it prints out this. It says Fahim. Then pass the code. Then it passes out ended, right? So where's the problem happening? It's happening somewhere here, right? It's not printing this out, so it's happening somewhere here. So I'm going to create a new variable, but you see that hold on, let me see if this one works. So I'm gonna say string new name, right? Equals name dot to lowercase. So now we're assigning that to a new variable. And now we're gonna say if new name contains FA, right? Now it says contains fa. So you guys see what was the issue here, right? It's basically we didn't create a new variable to hold the new the new string that was lowercase. So that we were supposed to do that. We just simply just said name to lowercase. We didn't give it a variable. So you see how we combined string methods, an if statement, and basically together, and we're able to create some small code. So it's very important you guys understand, uh, learn as much classes about Java as you can, specifically the string class and uh, string class. It's very important to understand string class. So you make sure you know all the methods. You understand what all the methods do in there. So if there was ever an issue in your program that like probably required something like this, if it contained FA, you would know that, oh yeah, I need to use that string class. Yeah, I'm gonna upload this video by tonight. Okay, so we basically uh, created a basic if statement right here, right? So is everyone familiar with the if statement? So what if I say, how would I say if the if it equals to Fahim using the thing right here? So what would I do right here if I want to see uh if name equals to Fahim? So if I say that, right? If I say if name equals to Fahim, right? Why do we use double equal? Why isn't it equal sign? What's the difference between one equal and double equal? When you use one equals, you're basically initializing it to a value, right? So here we say one equals, and we're basically giving this name a value of the value called Fahim. But when we use double equals, we check to see if it if it equals to that, like a comparison, exactly. But here you see we have an error, right? So what is that error? Uh, it was an extra token, right? So what should it print out right now? What will it print out? If I say if name equals this, the way how I spelled it, it would print out equals to Fahim, right? So what would it print out? It prints out equals to Fahim, right? And is there any other way to do this? Instead of saying the equal sign, can we use a string method instead of this? There's a string method called equals, right? Which is right here. And we could just type in Fahim right here. So if name equals Fahim, it should print out equals to Fahim. So you see that we could also use the string methods. Okay, so now let's create, let's create int age equals 18 and int height equals 6 feet, 5 feet, 60, 68, right? So this is in terms of inches, and this is 18 years old, right? Okay. So now let's say I'm trying to create an if statement that's basically saying you can only enter the roller coaster if you're above 16 years old and above 60 inches. So what would I put right here? So I wanted to print out you're old enough and tall enough to ride the roller coaster, right? So it would it would accept if you're above 16 years old and over 60 inches tall. Okay? So what should we put in this inside this parentheses? So if we just say age height, like would that make sense? Yes or no? We need to create some, you know, uh, uh, logic, right? So if we just say if age is greater than 16, right? It would print out this, right? But the thing is, we want to say it would accept if you're above 16 years old and, right? This is the keyword and over 60 inches tall. So if we're dealing with and, right? You guys need to know what sign you guys would use, right? So if we're dealing with and, the symbol is this. And or in Java, the symbol is this. So when we say and, we use this, and or is basically two those straight lines, whatever. I don't know those names. So if I say if age is greater than 16, that only covered this part, right? So now I have to include the and symbol, right? So this is basically and I would also have to say height 60, right? So now it's gonna print out this if both of these statements are true. So what would it print out? Is it gonna print out this? Our age is 18 and height is 68. Is it gonna print it out? Yes or no? It should print it out, right? So it says you're old enough and tall enough to ride the roller coaster. Why? Because here we initialize our age to be 18 and our height to be 68. And inside this if statement, right? I said if age is greater than 16 and height is greater than 60, you are old enough and tall enough to ride the roller coaster. You mentioned 68, not 60. Uh, I said 16 years old and 60 inches tall. I think this looks like an 8 for you guys since it has a dash between the 0. But it's actually a 0 right there. Okay, so now let's say, what if I change this to 12 years old? What would it print out now? What would this program print out? Is it going to print this out? Yes or no? It's going to print out ended, right? So why? Because if you look into our truth table, right, it's only going to print out a true statement if both of the things are true, right? But the thing was that age was 12 years old, so that was false, and the other one was above 60 inches, so false and true. So it gave me a false. So does that make sense to you guys now? So what if I put 40 inches right here? What would it print out here? It would print out ended, right? Why? Because both of these statements, they're false. If age is greater than 16, but age is 12, which is false, right? And height is greater than 60, but height is 40, so which is false. So it's not going to print this out. So now let's say we're 20 years old and we're like 60 inches, like 68 inches, right? So now I want it to be that it would accept if you're either older than 20. Oh, wait. If you're greater than equal to 20, I mean 18, or above 65 inches. So we wanted to print out this. Okay, so it's gonna print out you're old enough or tall enough to ride the roller coaster. But what do we have to put here? So we want it to be, it would accept if you're either greater than or equal to 18 years old or above 65 inches. So what would we put here? So let's deal with this first part, right? If you're either greater than or equal to 18. So what are we going to put here? If what are we going to put here? If you're either greater than or equal to 18. So we're going to say age, right? Greater than or equal to 18. So how do we say greater than or equal to? We say this, right? That's basically greater than or equal to 18. So let me write these stuff right here. Greater than, less than. Okay. So if our thing was, it would accept if you're either greater than or equal to 18, right? So we're gonna say if age is greater than or equal to 18. And what about this part right here? So we're dealing with or, right? So what symbol do we use? We use this, right? And now you're or above 65 inches. So what would we put here? So what are we dealing with? Above 65 inches, that's the height, right? So height is greater than 65 inches. Okay, so now we set the thing, right? So would it print out you're old enough or tall enough to ride the roller coaster? Yes or no? It should, right? So it says you're old enough, tall enough to ride the roller coaster. So now let's make this age 14. So now it's gonna say age equals 14 and height equals 68. Would this print out now? Yes or no? Remember, we're dealing with an or here. So is age greater than or equal to 18? So what is age? It's 14. So is this true or false? What kind of value is false, right? And now we're dealing with height, right? So if height is greater than 65, is it true or false? So now we have a false statement here and a true statement here. And we're using the or operator, right? So false or true, what should it be? What should the result be? It should give us true. So if it gives us true, it's going to print this out. And it does print it out, right? So once again, you guys would need to look at your truth tables and memorize it, right? So we just had an example of a a false and a true, right? And it gave us true. So once again, the best way to memorize is that in an and table, you would need both um, statements to be true in order to give you true. Otherwise, it would give you false in other statements. And for an or table, you need either side, either statement to be true in order to give you a true value. So does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so basically you read this from left and right. So here you have a true. Let me make this like this. I think if I bold it makes sense. Okay, so if you have a true and true statement, it's going to be true. It's going to give you true. If you have a true and false statement, it's going to give you false. If you have false and true statement, it's going to give you false. If you have false and false statement, it's going to give you false. That's for the AND table, right? So now for the OR table. Once again, for the OR table, you need either side to be true. So if you have a true or true, it'd give you your true. If you have a true or false, it'd give you true. If you have a false or true, it would give you true. And if you have a false or false, it would give you false. So do you guys understand that now? Are you guys all right? So here we just used some logical operators and we used a basic if statement, right? So now let's introduce the if else statement. So let's go back to that website. If then else statement, right? So the if then else statement provides a secondary path of execution when an if clause evaluates to false. You could use an if then else statement in the apply breaks or blah blah blah. Okay, so just know that the if then else statement provides a secondary path of execution when an if clause evaluates to false. So now let's go back to our code and let's just say if these conditions don't meet, right? We want them to print out, sorry, you're not old enough to ride the roller coaster, right? So we're gonna put an else here, and then we're gonna open it or close it right here, and then we're gonna print out sys out and be like, sorry, you're not old enough, old enough, or tall enough to ride the roller coaster. Okay, so now let me show you, let me break down the logic of this. So now I have an if and else statement, right? So let me just show. So if statement is basically if, right? And now if else statement, right? Is basically if, then you have your code, and then you're gonna have an else, and then you're gonna have your code, right? So this is an if statement, right? So you're just gonna have a single if, and then if it's true, right, it's gonna do this. If it's true, it's gonna execute this code. If it's not true, then it's gonna come to this else block and it's gonna execute this code. Here executes if true. Okay. So do you guys understand the difference between these two right here? So what's the main difference between these two statements right here? Besides one having an else statement. But what does that else statement basically do? Once again, if you come back here, right, it basically provides a secondary path of execution. Okay, so now let's go back, let's continue and build on this if statement that we had previously, right? So let's say, so what would it print out right now? If I were to run this program, what would it print out? It would print out the else statement, right? So let's look at it. Okay, so we have age equals 14 and height equals 68. And we said that would accept if you're either greater than or equal to 18 years old or above 65 inches. So if age is greater than or equal to 18, is this true or false? It's false for us, right? Because our age is 14. Then we have the or, and then we say if is height greater than 65. Is that true or false? That's true, right? So now we have a F or a false or true statement, right? So that's what's it gonna print out? It's gonna print out this, right? So it's not gonna print out that. So it's gonna print out this. You're old enough, and then it's gonna completely skip this code. It's gonna skip the else block because it was true right here, and it's gonna print out. It's gonna execute the code inside here, and then it's gonna get out of that if else statement because it doesn't need to go to else because this is true already. So it's just gonna print out you're old enough, and then it's gonna print out ended. See, it says you're old enough, right? Let me just say sorry. Okay. So now let's say, what if I have 14 years old and I have 53 inches, right? So what do you guys think will print out now? So my age is 14 and my height is 53. So if age is greater than or equal to 18, that's false, right? So because age is 14, or height is greater than 65, but our height is 53. So it's both of these are false. So false or false, it would give false, right? So it's not going to print out this code. It's not going to print out this code here. It's going to go to the else statement. And inside our else statement, it says, sorry, you're not old enough or tall enough to ride the roller coaster. So is it just going to print out this, or is it going to print out something else? So is it just going to print out sorry? Remember, the main method, right, it executes line by line. So once it executes this, it's going to be done with it, and it's going to print out this as well. So let's see. So you see it print out, sorry, you're not old enough or tall enough to ride the roller coaster, and then print it out ended. So does that make sense for you guys? Alright, so let's do another basic if else. So let's say, um, and number of packages. It will say 8. Okay, so if I say, so now I'm going to create an if statement. Now I would say if okay, so here this is a simple if else statement, right? So if I have number of packages declared as 8, what would it print out here? So there's the value is 8, right? So if number of packages is greater than 5, it would print out this. Or if it's not greater than 5, it's going to print out this. So it should print out this, right? Okay, so this is pretty basic if else, right? Now what if I say Now what if I do what if I use an if statement inside another else, right? Or if statement. So I'm gonna say, so if I wanted to say if there are more than 5 packages, I would say okay. So did you guys see what I did right here? I basically uh, created another if statement inside that if statement. Then I could add another else statement right here, right? And I would say, so now it looks a bit complicated, a bit more complicated, but it's honestly it's the same thing, right? So here I had an if and else statement first, right? But then I created another if and else statement under this if statement. So if I were to run this program right now, what would it print out? So it's good to add spaces if you can't, if you want to follow along easier. So I don't know if this will help. So what would this print out? So my variables are declared here. So basically, this is what you guys are doing right now is basically tracing. You guys are seeing what's it gonna print out, where is it gonna go. So if here this whole block of this whole if else statement, right? It starts with this thing right here. So and here it says if number of packages is greater than 5. So what is this a true or a false or true or false value right here? So this is a true is a true value, right? Why? Because we have 8 packages, right? But the number of packages is greater than 5. So if this is true, right? We don't have to worry about this statement. So we could totally ignore it, right? So now let's move on to here. So it's gonna print out this next, right? It will print this out. But now it goes to another if else statement, right? So don't get confused by the number of if else statements you see. You just gotta understand. You just gotta trace it and understand how it works. So now we're totally ignoring this, right? So let's just ignore that doesn't exist because we're already inside this the if statement. So now we have an if statement that says if price is greater than or equal to 20.00. So is this a true or false value right here? This is true, right? Because why? We have price as 25.30. We initialize it as $25.30. Here we said if price is greater than or equal to 20 bucks. So it's true. And then it's going to print out this, right? Else it would print out this. So we don't have to worry about that now, right? So it will print this next. And we're basically done with our code. Once we're done here, it's not going to go to else, right? Because that was part of this, but this was true. And then it's going to go back, it's going to go outside and it's going to see another else, but that was part of if it was part of this one, but this was true as well. So now it's going to go to the next, it's going to go to the next line of code. But next line of code, we don't have anything. So let's just say system data end. Okay, so it should print out there are more than 5 packages, and then it's over 20 bucks, and then end as well. So there are more than 5 packages, it's over 20 bucks, and end. So do you guys see how this works? The if else statements, right? You could use them inside each other, right? Just think of it like nested classes, but it's almost similar like that. But you know, I could create another I could create an if else statement inside this right here, right? If blah blah blah. So it depends on you how you want to do it. So our if else statement is clear for you guys right now. Well, do you guys understand the gist of it and the concept of it? So let's go over that quiz that I went over in the beginning of this mentoring, right? And it's not going to look intimidating now if you were to look over it. So here I created a quiz class, right? And you see all these if else statements. So many if else statements, right? But if you were to read it from the top, right, I would basically say if answer contains no, I'll print this out, right? Else it'd print out this. So basically when I was writing this code, I didn't create this many ifs, right? I just created one if else statement. And then I created another if else statement under that if else statement. So it's basically, you're working like you're creating an if else statement under an if else statement, basically like that. And that's why it's very important you guys format your code. Do you guys see how easy this is to read? Imagine if everything was like this. If everything was like unindented, you wouldn't know where to start, right? This looks insane, right? So it's very important you guys format your code. Once again, to format it, just simply go to source and format, or you could format it from the beginning of your code so you don't have to do it at the end. So please make sure you indent and use white spaces if it's required. Okay, so we just went over. Can you again? Yeah. So you basically created a new class, and then you would go to source and then format, or you could right click right here and just source format. So you see here it gives you my shortcut. So for Mac is basically up and then my command F. So for Windows it will show you guys the shortcut. I don't know the Windows shortcut. Why is the else at the bottom all ifs? So I basically created this program when one if and else, right? So let me show an example right here. So I said something like if price is greater than 10, so this is an example, right? And then I said another um, if price is greater than 15. And then I'm going to continue on this again, right? Wait, it was on this right here. Then I have another else statement. So you see how it's like making an arrow shape if I keep on making if else statements. So that's what basically this was. So I started off like with one if else statement and it went like that. So you see all the if is going like that and all the else is going that way. Isn't it that will execute line by line? Yeah, it will execute line by line. So let's check on this if else statement right here. So our thing is price is 25 bucks and 30 cents, right? So if price is greater than 10, is this true or false? This is true, right? So it's going to print out hello, and it's not going to print out this. It's not going to print out this, right? Because this is true. So now it's going to go to the next if statement, right? So if price is greater than 15, is that true or false? That's true as well again, right? So it's gonna print out hello, right? And now it's gonna go to the next if statement, right? If price is greater than 20, is that true or false? True, right? And it's gonna print out this. So let me just do one more. Else. Okay. So if price is greater than 30, is that true and false? False, right? But it's gonna print out buy. So it should print out hello, 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 and then buy. Do you guys agree? So it printed out hello, right? So this was true. And then printed out hello, which is this. Because it was true, it was greater than 15. Then we came to this if statement, right? It printed out this because it's greater than 20. And now it came to this if statement. If price is greater than 30. But the thing was that it's not, right? It's $25.30. So it went to this else statement right here. And which printed out buy. So does that make sense to you guys? If you guys can see if you guys can understand the concept, then that's good. So let's create grade a grade book. So after I'm done with this, we're gonna have our break. But let me just create a class grades. So inside this class, I'm gonna have a method, and I'm gonna say I want to return a character. So if you got an 85 in your quiz, right? It's gonna print out B, right? If you got 100 in your quiz, it's gonna print out A. If you got like a 90, like a 55, is gonna print out F, right? So do you guys see? So I want to make a method of that, right? I want to create a method, basically a grade calculator. So if it's going to return either an A, B, C, or D, or F, right? What's the return type? What can the return type be? It could be character, right? Um, but if you want to make it more complicated, you know how there's A plus, B minus, B plus, all those stuff. You can make it a string, but we're gonna keep it simple, right? So we're just gonna use character, and we're gonna call this method called grade calculate. Just say calc grade. And we're not going we're going to are we going to need anything inside the parameter? Yes or no? So if we're converting a grade to a letter grade, we're gonna need that grade somehow, right? So how are we gonna get that grade? So should we have a parameter defined in this? Yes or no? Who else says yes? And who says no? So once again, it's very important when you guys are programming. It's very important to know what kind of data you're gonna use inside your method. So in this method, we're dealing with that. We're gonna convert a number to a letter grade, right? But the thing is, how are we gonna get that number? So we're gonna need to pass that in the parameter. So we're gonna say int number grade. Okay. So now we're getting an error because I don't have the return character yet. So let me just call a character. Let me just declare a character variable. So I'm going to say character letter grade. And I'm going to return this. Okay, so now we need to initialize letter grade, right? So now we need to use, now how are we gonna use how are we gonna do this, right? If someone had like a 90, right? We're gonna say, all right, this guy gets an A. If someone got an 80, we're gonna say, all right, this guy got a B. So we need to use conditional operators, right? So we need to use if statements, if else statements, right? So we're gonna start with if. And what should we start with? Should we start with if number grade is like a high, if it's greater than 90 or greater than 100, or should we start with 55? So you guys got to think of that as well. So like in what way would it be easy to program? So let's just start from the higher number. So if we say if a number grade is greater than or equal to 90, we're going to say letter grade, and we're going to initialize it A, right? Else, we could say else if, right? So else if is basically saying you, um, if this isn't true, it's gonna go to the next else if, right? So I haven't introduced yet, but it's almost the same thing. So I would say else if number grade is greater than or equal to 80, right? I'll say letter grade equals B. And now we need to create another else if, right? Because what if this isn't true? So we need to go to the next else. So then in this else we have if number grade is greater or equal to 70, we're going to say letter grade equals to C. Else if number grade is greater than 60, right? We could say letter grade is D. And what's after D? It's F, right? There's no E or G or H or anything. F is basically the last letter, the lowest letter grade you can get, right? So we don't need to say an else if. We could just say else, right? We could just finish it off with else, and we just say letter grade equals F. So does this logic make sense to you guys right here? So what if I said number grade, if I started this, right? If I started with 55, if less than 55, and then I said less than 75, like that, do you guys think that could have worked? Yes or no? It could have worked, right? So it's up to you how you want to program it. Okay, so now let's call this inside our main method. So we're gonna need to create an object first. Okay, so instead of, I don't want to create an object, right? Let me just make this static. Okay, so now I don't need to create an object. I can just simply say grades and then calc grade. And now let's say 70, right? I don't have system.out here, so I'm gonna have to do it right here. So I'm gonna say sys out. And what letter grade should I print out? If I have a 70, let's say I make it 75. So if I have a 75, what letter grade should I print out? So let's look at back at our algorithm, right? So we're passing 75. Is number grade greater than, is 75 greater than or equal to 90? Is that true or false? That's false, right? So now we're gonna go to the next else if. So the next else is if 75 is greater than or equal to 80. So that's false as well. So it's gonna go to the next else if. If 75 is greater than or equal to 70, that's true. So now we're gonna say letter grade equals C. and then we're gonna come here and then we're gonna return the letter grade. So it should print out C. So you see here, it printed out C. Now let's print out, let's see, what if it's a 45? What should it print out? It should print out F, right? So it's an F because all 45 is not greater or equal to 90. Then it comes here, it's not greater or equal to 80. Comes here, it's not greater or equal to 70. Comes here, it's not greater or equal to 60. Then we come to the last else, right? Says else, right? And then we say letter grade equals to F. What if this was 99? Let's print out A, right? So here the letter grade is A. It's because if number grade is greater than or equal to 90, so 99 is greater or equal to 90, so it's going to print out A, and it's going to ignore all these other stuff right here. It's going to ignore this because it's already true right here. It doesn't need to come here. And then it's going to come to return letter grade. So hopefully that was a good example of if else if. All right, so now we're going to have our break. It's 8:03. Do you guys want to come back 8:15? All right, we'll be back in 8:15. All right. I think it's my career right now. We'll be back 8:15. All right, we'll be back 8:15. All right. Is everyone back? All right. So we just went over if else statements. Does anyone have questions about it? If not, I'll move on to while loops. So we just finished if else, right? If you want to like go back, right? There's the website is right here. So now let's go to um, the while and do while statements. Well, let's specifically talk about while. So while statements, the while statement continually executes a block of statements while a particular condition is true. Its syntax can be expressed as while expression and then the statement. So let me just copy this and paste this right here. Okay, so this is how you use a while loop expression. So once again, a while loop is a while. The while statement continually executes a block of statements while a particular condition is true. So now let's look at an example of the while loop. Okay, so let's say I have an integer number declared as 5. Okay, and now I'm gonna create a while loop. So while number is greater than 5, I want to print out hello. So what do you guys think this will do to my program if I were to run this? What is it going to print out? So actually, let me change it to while number is greater than 1. Okay, so what will it print out now? It's going to print out hello, right? So if you see this while statement, so while number is greater than 1, print hello. So here we have number declared as 5. So is this a true statement? Is number indeed greater than 1? Yes, right? But you're going to see what the purpose of the while program is right here. So if I run it right now, you see my console, right? It's just printing out hello continuously, non-stop. Just printing out hello, 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 right? Why? Let me just end the program. So it's printing it out forever, right? So while number is greater than 1, we print this out. And then it comes back to the statement again. Is number greater than 1 again? Yes, so print out hello. So now you come back to the statement again. Is number greater than 1? It prints out hello, right? So that's basically the while loop. Is going to be in a continuous loop. So here we have number initialized as 5. So 5 is always greater than 1. So it's going to keep on printing this out. So that's why, as Moses said, when you're dealing with while loops, you want to use incrementation or decrementation, right? So let me just say how to increment right here. So increments we use plus plus, right? In decrements we use minus minus. So plus plus that goes up by 1, minus minus that goes up by minus 1. So if I were to say right now, and then I say number, and then I say minus minus. So how many times, what will happen right now? So let's start, right? So right now our number is 5. So in this while while loop. It says our number is greater than 1. Is that true or false? So is number greater than 1? Will that be true or false? It would be true, right? So it's going to print out this. And then it's going to say number minus minus. So it's going to print out hello, and then number is going to be equal to what? 4, right? All right. So then it's going to go back to this while statement, right? So what is number right here? So what is number greater than 1? So number is 4, right? So 4 is still greater than 1, so it's going to print out hello again. And then it's going to say number minus minus, so it's going to say number equals 3. So now we're going to go back to that while loop, and then number is greater than 1. So what was number? Number was 3. So it's going to print out hello again. And then you number minus minus, right? Decrements, so number equals 2. Is 2 greater than 1, right? It's true, so it's going to print out hello. And then number equals 1, right? So now you have number as 1. 1 is greater than 1. Is that true or false? That's false, right? So once it hits false, it's going to stop. That's how your while loop stops. So it stops right here, right? So let me just, so how many times will it print out hello? As Moses said, it's going to print it out 4 times. Hello, 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 hello. Is it always decrement? No, you can, it depends how you program, right? So let's use an increment thing, right? So let's say number equals 1, right? And while number is less than 10, and we say number plus plus. So here we said we have a number that's initialized as 1, and while that number is less than 10, we're going to print out hello, right? And then we're going to increment it by 1. So here we have 1 is going to print out hello, and then number is going to be 2. 2 is less than 10, it's going to print out hello, and then it's going to increment 3. So now if you run it, you see it printed out hello 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. We use while loop when you don't know how many times we are running the program. So there's some programs out there that um, you know that continuously run in a while loop forever. Like an example I can think of is basically like there's some program that's were to run 24 hours, or like a server that's running for 24 hours or something. I don't know. It would run a while loop and it'll be continuously running. But usually you want your while loop, to end and some. You want it to have an end stop, the finish line. So the finish line is basically for us. This finish line is when it reaches um, until it's less than 10. As until it's greater than 10, that's when it's going to stop. When it's equals to 10, that's when it's going to stop, right? So that's what a while loop is. Let's do another example of while loop. So let's say I'll say int num again. So when we don't know the num variable, you need to initialize something in order to use the while, to use it inside the while parameter. So if you just have number like this, it's gonna give you an error. It's gonna tell you to initialize that variable. So it has to be initialized to something. So here we could say 0, right? We could also make it, let's say we could say grades dot calc grade. And you could give it a number, right? So let's just change this to 100, and let's make this start with 50. And I think if I say num plus 5, it increments by 5. No, okay, it doesn't. Or I just say num equals num plus 5. So that's how it increments by 5. Okay, so now let's run this program. Do you guys understand what's happening inside this while loop? So we have a number called 50, and oh yeah, so we could also use plus equals num. Um, this way it's easier for me. I think people are still not um, like once you understand this, then start using plus equals. That looks more professional. But this is a good way to do it as well. So the purpose of this is basically inside this while loop, I'm gonna have my num, and as long as it's less than 100, I'm gonna calculate that grade, that grade calculator that we used with if else statements, and it's gonna print out. Let's make it print out. You got a grade of, and we're gonna say num, right? And then it's gonna say num equals num plus 5. So if this started as 50, is 50 less than 100? Yes, true, right? So then it's gonna use a calculator. So what letter grade is it gonna give me here? If I put in if it's 50, what letter grade is 50 again? It's an F, right? And then it'll say you got a grade of F, and then it's gonna say num equals num plus 5. So it's gonna turn it into 55. So it's gonna keep on doing that. So let's see this. So you got a grade of 50, right? And then you got a grade of 55. Wait, let me. Oh no, I have to use I have to give this a car grade letter, right? And then I say grade letter right here. So you got a grade of F, you got a grade of F, then it goes D D, then C C B B A A. So does this make sense to you guys now? How you could use a while loop? This was like a more like an extra step in here because we called in another method, and then we incremented by 5, right? And what's the bound here? The bound is as long as it's less than 100. So once when it goes over 100, is that this method is gonna stop. Any questions on while loops? No questions. All right. So now let's talk about do whiles, right? So what are do while loops? Do while loops are basically it tells you the difference right here. So the difference between do while and while is that the do while evaluates the expression at the bottom of the loop instead of the top of the loop, right? So it's basically gonna at least execute the program once. So let me just copy down this. Okay, so let's see this in work, right? So let's have this is how you would use a do while. So I want to say do. Wait, is it no parentheses? Oh yeah, it's no parentheses. So do this. So here I'm gonna have my block of code. So I'm gonna print out. Hello 1 2 3, and while let me change this to 5, right? So while num is less than 10. Then I'm gonna say num plus plus. Okay, so basically a do while loop, it's going to execute first and then it's gonna do the while loop, right? Instead of in a while loop, you would check if the condition was true or false, and if it's true, then you would do that. You would do that code. But here you would do the code first, and then you would check the condition. So if I were to say, if I were to run this, right, what would it print out? How many times would it print out hello 123? So if I were to run this, it's going to print out hello 123, and it's going to have the number to 6, right? But here in the while loop, it would say the number wouldn't be 6, it would be 5 still. But when it comes to here, it's going to change that number to 6. So print it out 5 times. So once again, let's go over that. Let's trace it, right? So it reads line by line, right? So it's gonna perform this one first. So it's gonna say hello 123, right? And then it's gonna say num equals 6, right? And then it's gonna say while num is less than 10, right? But here it's still num is still 5. It hasn't changed yet. But when you come back to the do loop, that's where it changes. So now it's gonna say hello 123, right? Num equals 7. Hello 123. Num equals 8. Hello 123. Num equals 9, right? And then it does hello 123 again, and then it says and then it's going to come back to a while loop, right? And it's going to say num plus plus, and it's going to num equals 10, and then it's going to stop, right? Because the condition is false now. So does that make sense? While loop, do whiles are kind of like I don't like using them. You're barely gonna see them in like code, but it's just good to know. But mainly people use if statements, while loops, and for statements. All right, so that was an example of do while. If you find do while confusing, don't worry. I still find it confusing to me to this day. That's why I don't like using it, but it's not used that much. So now let's talk about for loops. For loops is basically let me see it right here. The for statement. Okay. So the for statement provides a compact way to iterate over a range of values. Programmers often refer to it as the for loop because of the way in which it repeatedly loops until a particular condition is satisfied. The general form of the for statement can be expressed as follows. So we're going to use we're going to use this format right here. So out of all these statements, right, for loops is um, it's very important to understand. Okay, so in the for loop, you're going to have the initialization, the termination, and the increment. So the initialization is basically where you're starting from, where your code is starting from. Your termination is where it's going to stop, right? And then your incrementation is basically how are you going to increment or decrement, and like how are you going to advance towards the next step. So let's look at an example right here. Okay. So this is how you make a use a for loop method. So what was the first thing? We need initialization, right? So typically, you have to create a variable if you haven't so I created a variable and I initialized it here. So I said int I equals 0, right? Or I could create int I right here, right? And I could just say I equals 0 right here. Okay, so then it's followed by a semicolon, right? You're gonna need to enter a semicolon. So let me just initialize this right here, since this way is more common. Okay, so you see the semicolon after the initialization. Now you need the termination. Where do you want to stop, right? So let's say I want I to be less than or less than 11, right? Or 10. Yeah, let's do less than 10. So that's my termination. So once I reaches over 10, that's where it's gonna stop. Once it has to be less than 10, right? And now we need to do the increment, right? So we're gonna say I plus plus. So now we're gonna write our code here. So let me just write something like hello world, something basic, right? So what this method is basically doing is it's gonna start from 0, right? I equals 0, and I is less than 10, and then you're gonna increment it, and then you're gonna print it out. So let's look at it. First, let me run it so you guys can see what it does. So you see here, print out hello world, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So print it out print it out 10 times. So let's see how it works, right? Okay, so here we initialized I equals 0. So I equals 0 so far, right? And is it less than 10 so far? Is I less than 10? That's true, right? Because I is initialized 0. So we usually read it like is int I equals 0, is I less than 10? Then we're gonna do the code, and what do we do after the code? We're gonna increment it, right? So now we're gonna print out hello world. So I'm gonna count this counter equals 1, right? So we set it 1 time so far. And now we're gonna increment I plus plus, right? So what is I equal to now? I is equal to what now? If we just incremented it, it's gonna be I equals to 1 now, right? Now is I still less than 10? It's true, right? So we're gonna print it out. We're gonna print out hello world again, and the counter equals 2 now. And then we're gonna increment I plus plus again. Let me just make this 5 so it's a better example. Okay, so okay, so now what value does I hold now? So if let me create a space after this so it makes sense, right? So now I equals 2. Is I still less than 5? I still less than 5, right? So that's going to be true. So if it's true, you're going to print out this method. Counter equals 3. And then we're going to say I plus plus, right? And now what does I equal to? I equals to 3. I is still less than 5. Counter equals 4. Then we're going to say I plus plus. Now I equals to 4 now, right? I is less than 5. Hello world. Counter equals 5. I plus plus, right? Now I equals to 5, right? What about, is this true now? Is I less than 5 now? Here it becomes false, right? Programs for loop stops here. So now you see what's the counter of hello world? We have it 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So once again, how does the for loop read, right? So you have the initialization, then you have what's it called? the termination. So this is the initialization. You see that we initialized int I equals 0. And then we had the termination. Where do you want it to stop, right? So I said I is less than 5. And then you have the incrementation. And then you have your code. So how does this read again, right? So it starts from here. Int I equals 0. Is 0 less than 5? True, right? So then it's going to print this out. Once that prints out, it's going to increment it. So it's going to say I plus plus. That 0 now turned into a 1. Now it's going to go back to the beginning. It's going to say, it's going to go. It's going to come back here, right? It's not going to come back here. It's going to come back here, and it's going to say, is 1 less than 5? That's true. So it's going to print this out, and it's going to increment it. Now it's going to say, is 2 less than 5? True. Print it out. So do you guys understand for loops, right? Let's do another example. So where do you pick up the value of the increment? So right here, this is where we increment, right? We could also, okay, so you see how we start as 0, and our variable needs to be less than 5. As long as it's less than 5, we will print this out. So we're gonna need to increment. We're not gonna decrement. We're gonna increment, right? Because we want this to eventually stop. If we did minus minus, let's see what happens. See, it's continuously printing it out, right? There is no stop to that loop. Why? Because it's once it's 0, right? Is 0 less than 5? Hello world. And then you decrement it. Now it's a -1. Is -1 less than 5? Yes. Print it out. Now it's -2. Is -2 less than 5? So it's going to keep on printing it out, right? It's going to keep on printing it. So it's going to be on a continuous loop. Can we replace int I variable for an instance of a class? For an int object. Initialize. So let me try that. I'm not sure about that. Let me see. Actually, I'm not going to set it. Okay, so let me try this real quick. So I'm going to say grades. Yeah, see, so that's going to be an issue right here. So when you're trying to like look for the incrementing and the termination, that's going to be a problem. So I think there's a way to do it, but it's more advanced. It's like an advanced way to do it. Okay. Fahim, get my grade. Yeah, I could do that. So, dang it, I just file, edit, undo. Okay, never mind. But yeah, I think you can do it. I just need to. I'll spend some time after and see and try it again. Try it again. All right. So does everyone understand for loops now? All right. So main thing is that you guys are gonna have to keep on practicing using these stuff. Um, like let's give an example. Like I want to print out the so let's try this, right? See, let's start from 10. Okay. So here we see that our initialization, we initialized I equals to 10, and as long as I is greater than 0, we're gonna do whatever the code is here, and they're gonna decrement it, right? So it's gonna print out down 10 times, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. It's because we started as 10, and as long as it's greater than 0, and then we decrement it. So it's not only for incrementation, it could be for decrementation as well. Let me see if so this it decrements it by 2. Or wait, does it? I okay, I don't know what this does here. So I equals I minus 2. Okay. So this decrements it by 2. I forgot how to do it. Was it equals minus or minus equal? Let me try it this way. Yeah, it's minus equal. So this is another this way of writing is basically another way of writing equals I equals I minus 2. That's basically another way of writing it. So another way of writing of I equals I minus 2 is simply just saying minus equals. And if you want to increment them by 2, you would say plus equals. So let me just use this for right now since it makes more sense for you guys. So yeah, those are basically conditional statements. If you guys, you guys are, you guys will be seeing a lot of these inside methods in the future. Um, Let me see if I see any of them inside my Selenium project. Pretty sure I see some stuff. There's a lot of these methods in there. Can quickly go over nest if? Yeah, sure. So let's look at the generic class. So this is our common API. So you see we're using if and else statements right here, right? You guys understood if and else statements today, right? It makes more sense, right? So once you guys get up here, it should make a lot of sense. Here we're using if else statements for our web driver, right? To get our local driver, we're using if else statements. So if you guys understand these stuff that I taught today, then getting into Selenium it should be pretty easy, right? You see more if else statements right here. And the rest are pretty simple. So here we used an if else statement. I don't think I used a for loop, but for loops are still pretty common. So yeah, so I just wanted to show you guys if you guys understand what how to code using if else statements, while loops, and for loops, then you guys writing your code for your Selenium project should be pretty easy. You saw all those lines of codes, but like 60-70% of lines of codes were like if else statements and those stuff. So it should be pretty simple for you guys. All right, so let's quickly go over nest if. Um, so here's an example of a nested if that I used. Uh, Let me show the example again. It was in my practice class. So here you can see that I have a lot of if statements and also a lot of else statements. So these I basically, this is basically nested if else statements. So I basically created one if else statement, and inside that if else statement, I created another if else statement. So right here, I asked, this is a quiz, right? So I asked, can you instantiate an interface? And I took that uh, a scanner, right? I got that answer. I turned it into lowercase, and I said if it contains no, he's gonna go to the next question. No is the correct answer, right? If it's not no, if it's anything else besides no, it's gonna go to else, right? And it's gonna say, sorry, you answered correctly. So now inside, so if he did answer correctly, which is this one right here, I created another an if statement, right? This was question number 3, right? Blah blah blah. So this looks confusing, but let's go over an example of it right here. So let's just create, say int age equals 15. And let's use that example again, right? 60 inches. So now I could say, I could create a if statement saying something like, if age is greater than 5, I would print out you're a kid, right? Or are 5-year-olds considered toddlers? I'll just say you're a toddler. Okay? And else, oh no, if age is less than, okay. So you see what I'm doing right here, right? You're not a toddler. So here, above 1 year is toddler. All right, so they stop being toddlers around what, like 10 years old or something? I don't know. Okay, so this is just an example, right? So here I have age equals 15. So I have, so if age is less than 5, right? So right now it's 15. So is 15 less than 5? That would be false, right? So it's gonna go to my else statement, and it's gonna say you're not a toddler. So if I print this out, it's gonna say you're not a toddler, right? And then I could have another else if statement here. All right, so I could have another if statement right here, right? So if I say age is less than 10, right? I could say system dot out and say you're a little kid. And then I could have a else statement here, right? And I would say you're not a little kid. Okay? So now I come back to this if statement, right? If he's if he's if he's still a little kid, I want to say if age is less than um 19, right? Now I could say you're a teenager, right? And I could have an else statement for that. I could say you're not a teenager. Okay, so you could keep on doing this. You could make it so you saw how I just started with one if else statement, right? So if you keep on making nested else, it's gonna the all those ifs is gonna come like this, like in towards like the right, and then all those else's are gonna come back like this where my mouse is moving. So if you see my quiz here, you see all my ifs, they're following in a they're going towards the right, right? And then the else they're going towards the left. So that's how it turns out to be. If you're properly formatting your code and keeping track of like indentation and spaces, it should be easier for you to write nested if else. All right, so now let's run this code. So if you were to run this code, what would it print out? So okay, so we haven't used height, so let's just ignore that. So we're just using age. So let's run this program, right? So what would it print out? So let's look at it, right? So age is 15. So is age right here, is it less than 5? Yes or no? True. True or false? It's false, right? 15 is not less than 5, right? So it's going to go to my else statement. So my else statement is right here. So this if else, this if statement is for this, right? And if this isn't true, it's gonna come to this else statement right here. So now inside this else statement, I say you're not a toddler, right? So now I have another if else, and I said if age is less than 10. So if I were to say if is this true or false, uh, is here we have 15, right? So this is still false. So it's gonna go to my else statement right here, right? And it's gonna say, no, I mean, it's gonna come to my else statement right here. It's gonna say you're not a little kid. So that's what it's just gonna print out. So, so why do you guys think it didn't come here? Because we didn't program it like that, right? Where we should have put this, we should have put this inside this else statement, right? So it's honestly, I feel like this was a good example showing you guys. If you guys see the logic of this code, I programmed it like this way. I should have programmed it here, but it's this is a good example to see like how how can you trace a code. So you want to trace a code, right? So let's start from the beginning again. So once again, age is 15. Is 15 less than 5? No, right? So it's going to come to this else statement. It's going to ignore this statement right here. So now it's going to be involved from this bracket, right, to this bracket right here. It's going to be involved with this stuff right here. So now we're going to come to the next line, right, as it reads line by line. So now it's going to print out this, right? So you're not a toddler. But now it comes to this if statement. Where does this if statement lines up with? It lines up with this, right? So this if else, now we're worried about this block, right? So now we say if age is less than 10, but what is our age? Our age is 15. So 15 is less than 10, that's false, right? So it's gonna ignore all these stuff right here, the if else. It's gonna move to this else because this was false, so it's gonna come here. And it's gonna print out you're not a little kid. Does that make sense to you guys now? Even though like I said like is I said you're a teenager, you're not a teenager, blah blah blah. But it's very important to know how to trace code. So you see how this was false and it automatically moved here. It's ignoring everything here because it was false. If this was true, right, it would come here. It would come to this statement right here. So let's say what if age was 8? What would it print out? even though it makes no sense. Like the system.out, it would make no sense, but just understand how to read and trace a code. I will give you guys 30 more seconds. So Syed Raza said you are a little kid. Josephine said you're a toddler. 10 and Aisha Khatun said 10 and 19. So it's gonna print out you're a little kid and you're a teenager. Nazmul Nahar said you are not a little kid, and Moses Perez said you are a little kid. All right. So let's trace this code. Okay. So once again, it's very important you guys know how to trace code. So the age is 8. This is the block of code we're dealing with, right? This right here. This is the block of code we're dealing with, right? This close bracket is closing this if else statement, right? So age is 8, right? So is 8 less than 5? Is that true or false? That's false, right? So it's going to move on to this block now. And in this block we have this. We're dealing with this. Okay? So now it's going to print out you're not a toddler, right? That's what's going to print out. And now it's going to come to this if statement. So now we're dealing with this. But so far we've only printed out you're not a toddler, right? So that's what's printed out so far. So now we're going to see if age is less than 10. So 8, right? Is 8 less than 10? Is that true or false? That's true, right? So it's going to print out, now it's going to print out you're a little kid, right? Since it's true. And now it's going to be only involved with this block now. So now we're going to see if age is less than 19. So is 8 less than 19? Yes, right? So it's going to print out you're a teenager. Even though age 8 is not a teenager, it's still just ignore whatever the code is doing. Just know how to trace a code. So you guys know it's going to print out your toddler. It's also going to print out your little kid, and also going to print out your teenager, right? You're a toddler, you're a little kid, you're a teenager. And once it prints this out, there's nothing else for it to do, and it's gonna like go to the next line of code. The next line of code is not this, right? Because it ignored it, because this is for if this was false, it would come here. So the next line of code after this statement would be out of the if else block. So does that make sense to you guys now? So at age 8, you're not a toddler, you're a little kid, you're a teenager. I could put anything here, right? I could say hamburger, right? I could say um, New York, NYC, right? Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So the logic made sense, but not the results. So once again, don't get confused by the results, right? I mean, don't get confused by what what the program is trying to output. Understand what the program is, the logical aspect of the program, right? So if I were to say if age is less than, I mean, if age equals 3, what would it print out? So it's just going to print out you're a toddler, right? So this is our if statement right here, if else statement. Is age less than 5? 3 is less than 5, that's true. So it's just going to print this out, and it's going to ignore this because that's the else statement. So that's that else statement if it was for false. But since this is true, we're not dealing with this. We're only dealing with this, and that's it. It's only going to print out that, and we're done. So it's honestly how you write your code. This example was pretty confusing because like I gave in like weird results and stuff. I didn't mean to do it like that. I accidentally did it like that, but it was honestly a uh, good error to come up to show you guys that to show you guys how to read code and trace code. So that's how you guys got to think of when you're thinking of your if else statements, right? You got to think of, all right, so if this value is true, and then it's going to go to my false, but where do I want my code to continue from? If do I want it to continue from the true statement or from the false statement? So it's up to you how you want to play around with your code. All right, so that's it for tonight. Um, it was probably confusing because this was the first day. If you guys weren't familiar with uh, these statements, right? So I gave the link in the document, so it has all the statements right here. So it talks about the if then. It also talks about switch, right? Switch I didn't teach, but it's pretty simple. There's videos out there, but we don't use the switch that much. Then I talked about the while, and I also talked about the for statement. Tomorrow, um, someone else is doing mentoring, but I'm also going to do the second half of the mentoring, and I'll probably talk about arrays, the new reference type. All right, so that's it for tonight. Any more questions or like any help? And do you guys need help with your your code lab? Any questions on those stuff? Do you guys know how to see how many answers you corrected? I mean, how many answers you completed in code lab? Do you guys know how to? All right, so this is how you can do it. So just open up your Turing's Craft or your login to your code lab. No problem. So this is me from last semester. Okay, so just go to any questions that you completed correctly. So I'm just gonna go to this question, right? I completed it correctly. So any questions that you completed correctly, just go into there. Let me know when you guys are all there. You guys should, Mr. Murphy said to have 200 before this weekend or 300. Was it 200 or 300? We have like 2 weeks left of Java, I think. So it's 300. All right, so you guys have a lot of stuff to continue. So hopefully, there's a lot of questions on these things that we learned today. So you could use those knowledge and try. All right. So does everyone have their code lab opened up and they're in a question that they've answered correctly? All right. So what we're gonna do is we're going to right click anywhere in the page and we're gonna go to inspect. So now we're gonna go to inspect, click on inspect. Okay. So now once this pops up, right? It's different for whatever browser you're using. So I think for Windows it's Control F to find the search, right? I think for Mac is Command F. All right. So now when you guys press Control F or Command F, right? A search bar will pop up, right? And now you just type in correct. And once you type in correct, right? The number that's here, that's how much you answered. So I've answered 309. How many did you guys answer so far? 287, good stuff. 75, keep on working. So yeah, once again, just Control F or Command F and just type in correct. And it'll show the number. They'll say 1 out of 1 of 309. and that number is basically how many you've answered correctly. 103. Still a lot of catching up to do. And honestly, the code lab, if you're new to programming, it helps you with the syntax and stuff. But they ask for specific stuff, which I hate, and it gets me annoyed. So, but you guys should keep on doing it. All right. Like 27 is incorrect. Hold on. Let me see. Yeah, so I had 309, correct. So that's how much you've done, supposedly. Do you guys have the same screen popped up as me? Basically, if you guys know how to use these elements, you know, um, when it comes to Selenium, this is what basically we're doing. We're inspecting element and refining the learning how to use those and stuff. What is the answer of hexadecimal value of 15? I think I looked that up. I looked at the chart for that because I don't memorize that by heart. So the topics right here for object-oriented programming, you guys should know most of these stuff right now, right? We did advanced OOPs. So they call this advanced object-oriented programming. We just learned about inheritance, right? Would you guys call inheritance easy or hard? It's pretty easy, right? So, and they label it as advanced. So if you guys are caught up with the stuff that Mr. Mafibai taught and the mentorings, you guys should, be able to do Java really good. MD Hussein, that's just how the convention is for the hexadecimal stuff. Like I don't think you can explain it. It's just like you just gotta know it. But yeah, I didn't memorize that, so I had to look that up as well. All right, guys, that's end for the training. I'm gonna end the session. See you guys tomorrow. Peace.